We're going to take a look at lesson 5, animating a multimedia presentation. So we'll create a complex animation with multiple layers. We'll adjust the duration of a layer. We'll animate with position, scale, and rotation keyframes. We're going to use parenting to sync the animation of layers. We'll use a Bezier curve to smooth out a motion path. We'll animate a pre-composed layer. We'll apply effects to a solid layer. Lastly, we'll go through and we'll fade out some audio inside of here. So as we go ahead and get started, let's go ahead and just create ourselves a new project. And we'll go ahead and take our file, save as, and go ahead and navigate to wherever you have lesson 5 or your lessons folder set up. And we'll go ahead and save this in the finished project here. So lesson 5 finished and save. And then once we have this set, we need to go ahead and start to import ourselves some of the footage that we're going to ultimately be working with. So we're going to go ahead and come over to the project panel, go ahead and double click. And then once again, navigate to wherever you have your lessons saved at. We are going into lesson 5. We're going to get inside of our assets folder. In here we have this sky.ai file. As you go and import it, make sure that you have import as set to footage. We'll go ahead and click on open. Now, as that comes up, it's going to ask us how do we want to import this footage wise. Do we want to go in? There are layers inside of here. So we see our sky and we see they list as wrapped clouds. And we have merged layers. We're going to choose merged layers in this case. We'll go ahead and click on OK. And you should find that that's brought in. You'll see the little preview in the upper left-hand corner. And then we also want to come back over here and double click once again to import another file. In this case, the balloon.ai file. And in here we want to import this as composition retain layer sizes. So we're going to bring this in. It's going to create us a new composition called balloon. And then inside of there will be the individual layers as well. So there we see our balloon layers. Toggle that open. There are all the layers that exist inside of that AI file. So both AI files, but brought in entirely different ways. Then we want to go ahead and import ourselves in one more file. It's going to be the fire.mov. So when our guy in the balloon pulls on the rope, the fire is going to come up inside of that. So you can either double click again in the project panel. You can hit Command I. You can go into import. And we're simply going to bring in the fire.mov file. This is going to be set to footage. And then we'll go ahead and click on open. Then you should find that you have everything inside of your file. Just begin working with it. So at that point, I'm going to go ahead and save. So I have everything brought in, laid out. As I said, I typically save anytime I make any major changes or just prior to running any render. So let's go ahead and create ourselves a new composition. So we're going to come out into our composition panel and go ahead and click on new composition, which is going to give us our composition settings dialog box. So we're going to go ahead and name this balloon scene. So we're going to assemble everything together. Down here inside for our preset, we're going to go ahead and choose HDTV 1080-25. For our pixel dimensions, make sure we have our width set to 1920 by 1080. going to allow us to go in. It's going to be a 16 by 9, essentially is what it's going to be set at. We come here, our pixel aspect ratio. We'll go ahead and set that to square pixels. All good on there. Frame rate's going to be at your 25. That's why we chose the 10 HD TV 1080, giving us 1080 for our horizontal lines, 25 for 25 frames per second. And then resolution down here, we're going to go ahead and cut this resolution down to quarter. And then the last thing here is going to be our duration. We're going to go ahead and set that for 20 seconds. So I'm just going to type 2000 into there. Anytime we go and we begin typing inside of this, you'll see to the right, it's indicating what it is. So it's showing that this will be 20 seconds. Then we'll go ahead and click on OK. And then what you should have yourselves a composition that shows up inside of the composition panel. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So this is balloon scene. Comes up. All we're seeing is black right now because that's the color we chose for the background, or left it on the default setting on that background. What should end up happening with that is whatever the last one is you created should have that same background color. So if you're working with a specific color, that should be available to you each time you go in there and work with it. So let's go ahead and drag our sky footage. So that's our sky AI file over there. Let's go ahead and drag that out to our timeline. So after we bring that into here and drop it, what you should see is something that looks about like this. Now if it's starting to look different, be sure that your composition settings match up and are correct, or you could end up with something different as you end up working with it. So what's going to end up happening is the balloon's going to float across the sky. Essentially, they're going to blow away. And they're going to get wrapped on those clouds, and they're going to float themselves back into, or float into our view. So let's go ahead and we're going to drag the sky layer. So if we click on the sky layer here to work with it, if we go ahead and we zoom out, you'll be able to see the edges. And you can just do that simply with the mouse scroll wheel. It's a quick way to be able to zoom out on things. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to drag this up and over so that lower left of our footage is there at the lower left corner of the composition. Then we'll go ahead and we'll save what's there. Remember we went in and we started dealing with anchor points and setting what the anchor point is, or location of the anchor point, telling it to be centered. The main reason we do that is because everything that we go through and we transform, and that works off that center point. Also, when we start dealing with values, they all work off of that anchor point that's there. So let's go ahead and open up our balloon composition. So we're going to come over to the balloon composition. I'm going to double click on that, and you should find that it opens up inside of the composition panel. Now after it opens up, you're going to see all of the layers in there: our green canvas, red canvas, blue canvas, yellow canvas, eyes, head, balloon, forearm, and upper arm. What we're going to end up doing with this is it's going to allow us to go in and animate the balloon, allow the balloon to move. We're also going to animate the arm, so that way he's going to pull down on the rope, and we're going to have fire actually come up on that, so it'll control or start to work off of the elevation of that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to zoom in on the balloon. So all I'm doing is zooming in. If you hold down the space bar, it'll shortcut to the hand, which will allow you to move the composition or around inside of your panel here. So again, as you zoom in and out, you can go ahead and set this up. We're going to go and zoom in. And if you come in here and you start to click on things, you're going to be able to see, or click on your image, you're going to be able to see what exactly is it that we have available to us. So there's the head, there's the yellow canvas up top, there's the eyes, you have the forearm, you have the upper arm. So those are all the pieces that we're going to go in here and be working with. So go ahead and get him set so he's centered on or inside of the composition panel. Resize anything that might be necessary. And then ultimately go ahead and grab a hold of the selection tool, which if you use the space bar to move it, it'll go right back to the selection tool when you let go of it. And we're going to go ahead and come down here and we're going to select the upper arm inside of the timeline. So the upper arm layer in your timeline. And then we're going to come up here and select our pan behind tool. And what this is going to allow us to do is allow us to move the anchor point without actually moving the entire layer inside of our composition panel. So we're going to do that. We want to move the anchor point. So we go through and we know that this is our anchor point here. We actually want to go ahead and move that up to our shoulder. So we're going to grab a hold of that and bring it up. Now, why are we doing this? Because the anchor
where it moves from. So if you want the arm to rotate, the anchor point needs to be where the arm would actually rotate from.
Right. So we're looking at it from an anatomical standpoint that we want to move that because any transformations that we apply are going to actually move around our anchor point. So we want to go ahead and lock that anchor point in towards the shoulder, there where we'd expect that movement to actually occur from. So as we go through and create the rotation, it's going to go from that spot. We'll come down here inside of our timeline. Let's go ahead and select our forearm. And we want to go ahead and we're going to take, again, the same tool. We're going to come in here and we see this is where the anchor point's currently at. We're going to go ahead and bring that down here onto our elbow. So again, thinking about where it's going to pivot from. If we come over and select our head layer, we want to go ahead and move this anchor point down to the neck since our head doesn't move and stuff from the middle. So let's go ahead and bring this down here, put it right down here at the neck. So as the head moves and the head rotates, it's going to go off of that point. You can choose where exactly you think the midpoint of his neck is. And then we'll jump back over to our selection tool. Shortcut for our selection tool is V, or you can go up top and actually go and select it. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to save this. Now as we go through and start to work with items, we're going to go in and we're going to parent. And we did a little bit of that with some of the other lessons, allowing us to go in and use motions and changes that occur on one layer to impact another layer. So let's go ahead and deselect all of our layers down inside of our timeline panel. And we want to go ahead and select the head and the upper arm layer. So we're going to select the upper arm layer. I'm going to go ahead and hold down Command and click on the head layer. So now we have both of these layers selected, and we're going to go out here to our parent link, and we can go ahead and set these to 7 for the balloon. Notice that when I go through and I choose one of them and change one of them, since they're both selected, it automatically is going to change the parent link to the other one. So whether you do it for the head layer or you do it for the upper arm layer, you should see that it says 7 balloon for both of those layers. So now when we go through and start to work with it, the head and the upper arm layers are actually child layers of the balloon layer. So when we go through and begin to work with that, we have the eyes that we're going to set up so that they will move with the balloon and also go through and move and work with what we have for the head. So let's go ahead and go to our eyes layer. So here it should be layer 5. We're going to come over here and we're going to parent that to the head. Then we're going to come down to our forearm layer, and in this case, we want this to move with the upper arm. So now those two layers being parent, and we go and we start to deal with the rotation, it's going to move at the same time as the other one. So what we also have is we have that fire layer that we had up above here. And the fire is designed to, of course, come out of the little burner that's on the balloon. So we need that to also go through and travel with the balloon as it moves through, as it sways, anything else that happens to the balloon, we need that to go with it. So let's go ahead and bring the fire layer, or the fire.mov, and we need to bring it down here. We're going to place it below the yellow canvas. So we're going to go ahead and set that into there. Because we want the fire to appear as though it's going inside of our balloon. So therefore we want it to be behind the different canvases. Because those colors are over top. Once those disappear later on, we'll have a regular part to the balloon in there. So it should be between yellow and the eyes. Now, as you go through and do that, you'll notice that all of our parenting, they automatically update, even though before it said 9 upper arm. Once you brought that in there, it slid them all down, so it will go through and update them. So don't think that you have to be worried that they're not going to be there. So right now we go through and we start to look at our fire. Where's our fire placed at? Well, it's going to be placed in the center of our canvas. So if we zoom out, you're going to see up here, that's where our fire is at. Well, what we need to do is we need to bring that fire down so that you can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that down to position it with our burner. So once you have that set, you can see what's happening with that. Now where exactly you place that doesn't really matter. With it selected, you can use the arrow keys to nudge it up. So if you think the fire is going to have some gap between it, you can do that. If you feel as though it's going to come out closer to it, you can go ahead and adjust that. Again, placement is up to you. And if you scrub across, you're going to see that that fire comes in, so it's a burn, then it's going to release. So scrub, see what's happening with your fire. Now as we go through and we start to look at our views, over here in the lower left, this is our magnification. So we can fit, it's going to make it fit into there. We can go ahead and adjust this if we want to zoom out. So we can go through and see everything that is in there. Now once you're satisfied with the position, location of the fire, we then need to go ahead and make sure that our fire moves with our balloon. So over inside of our parenting, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set this now parenting to balloon. So as you go through and work with that right now, that's going to work. We move the balloon layer, that goes somewhere, it's going to impact our fire as well with it. So once I have that set, I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now we're going to go through and we're going to begin to work with our layers. Now we have previously gone through and pre-composed layers, which allows us to take them and move them into a new composition, which then ultimately nests them together. So what we're going to do is we're going to pre-compose our canvas layers, which will allow us to work with them separately and allow them then to trail off towards the end, which is going to let us turn them into or allow them to become clouds. So let's go ahead and go into our balloon timeline. And we're going to come down here into the timeline. What we see is we have our green canvas down to our yellow canvas. I'm going to click on the green canvas, hold down Shift, and select the yellow canvas. You can also click on the first one, hold down Command, and click on the other 3. But you want to make sure they are all selected. Then we're going to come up here to the top of our screen and choose Layer. Come down to the bottom, Pre-compose. Now once it comes up, we're going to see our Pre-compose panel. We're going to go ahead and let's call this Canvas. So we're going to move all the attributes into that new canvas, or new composition, I mean. So once we go and do that, what's going to happen is they are their own individual setup. It's going to be another composition, but allows us to work with these and nest. You'll see it be nested inside of our balloon layer. So once we have that set, we'll go ahead and click on OK. The look isn't going to change. The only thing that's a little bit different now is that when we see it selected on there, it's selecting the outside confines of it as opposed to selecting just the, or looks over top of the balloon itself. So now we have that pre-composed, and we want to go in and look at how we're going to work with the canvas. So like I said, we have the canvas in here. If we go and we double click on the canvas composition, it's going to go ahead and open up the canvas composition inside of our timeline panel, and then we can use this to go in and ultimately edit the composition. So with this select, we're going to go up to the top and go to composition and go to composition settings. Now once we do that, we're going to see what are the dimensions of everything that's inside of here. What we're going to come in here and do is we're going to go ahead and change the width on this. So we're going to go ahead and come in here and select our width, and we're going to change that up to 5,000 pixels. And if you look as you do that, you can see what's happening inside of your composition to the right. So that's the only change we're making. We're going to go ahead and click on OK. And we're going to go ahead and select all 4 of these layers down here. So we're going to click on the green canvas, shift click down on yellow canvas so that all of these are selected. And we're going to move them all the way over to the far left side of our canvas. So as I go to move that, I'm going to hold down shift. That's just going to constrain it to left to right movements. It also works for up and down movements. So we're going to drag that to the left and bring it all the way over here to the edge of our canvas. So now if we jump back over to our balloon, you're going to see that we have the canvas or the balloon sitting over top. The colors are on the left-hand side there off it, because remember, we're dealing with the width of it. So if you start to look at it, or you look at the box that's showing up there on that canvas layer being selected, that's those 5,000 pixels wide that we were working with. So now we have the balloon over here. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take it to where the balloon is going to move over. The colors are going to move over onto our actual balloon. So you may need to zoom out so you can see all of this. At this point, 50% works so I can see it. And we have the canvas layer selected. Should still be selected down in your balloon. If not, go ahead and select that. And what we want to do is we want to go ahead and drag that so it comes over and covers up the bare balloon. At this point, we're just adjusting what is here. So I'm going to hold down shift, and we're going to bring this over until it covers up the balloon. And now we have this set. So since we have it in place, we want this to travel with the balloon. So let's go ahead and parent our canvas layer, which is the canvas composition, to layer 5, which is the balloon. So if you're wondering what your parenting should look like right now, that's what you should have. You should have balloon, balloon, head, balloon, up, none, upper arm, balloon. So we're getting things in place and adjusting what we have for our parenting. So this is still all set up. We're just getting things in place so that they're ready for us to go in and ultimately animate the content. So now that they're all there, we're going to go and we're going to animate that. We're going to animate our character, allowing us to use the position and the rotation keyframes to create that movement of the arm. So we should be inside of our balloon timeline. And we have our canvas layer, and let's go ahead and come down, and we also want to select then, or shift select all of the items. So we're going to go ahead and hold down shift and click on the upper arm layer. So all layers in the composition are going to be selected. Then we're going to hit Command C, which is going to allow us to copy all of the layers. Now once we have them copied, we're going to jump over here into our balloon scene. That's the one that we started up. Remember, we built that. We brought in the sky, and then we repositioned the sky. So we're going to go ahead and come over here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to paste those in. Now once you paste them in, it's going to place them above the sky, and they should remain in the same order they were in when you copied them. If for some reason yours comes in below the sky layer, then simply go ahead and move the sky layer back down to the bottom. And then once those are set, just go ahead and click anywhere off of the rest of them so nothing is selected. Let's go ahead and let's save what we have up to this point. So now we need to go in and start placing in our keyframes. So what's going to happen is we're going to have the balloon, it's going to enter the scene from the bottom, it's going to drift across the sky, and eventually it's going to depart in the upper right corner of the frame. So we're going to keyframe starting and end points first. So we know where we want it to begin, we know where we want it to end. At that point we can go through and we can do a lot of stuff adjusting that Bezier curve, which remember is our motion path, just like we did with the other flower. You know, on the last one where it comes down to the flower pot, we can still adjust what that movement is going to be. So let's go ahead and select the balloon layer inside of timeline. So that's the balloon / balloon.ai. And we're going to hit S to reveal our scale property. Now we also want to be able to control our position and our rotation. So remember, we're going to hold down Shift, we'll hit P, and we'll hit R. So now we have our scale, position, and rotation properties all available for us to go in and begin to work with. So let's go ahead and adjust our scale to start with. We're not keyframing just yet. So we're going to go ahead and set that to 60%. Make sure that you have the little link turned on there. As long as that link's turned on, it's going to constrain the proportion so that once you put in the value into one of the values, if you hit return, it will go ahead and apply that, or even tab, it'll apply it to the other value of that. So it's going to scale down to 60, and all of the child layers will also scale down to 60% as well. You may need to adjust your magnification to see more. If you do, go ahead and do so. What we want to do is we're going to take the balloon layer now, and we want to go ahead and drag this off screen, so below the scene. So if I go ahead and I move this down, again holding down Shift, it's going to go down and move off screen. Now they use a few different values. So if you want to see positioning based upon what they have set, 844.5 and 2250.2 is the placement that they ended up going off of, so you can see where it's placed at based upon what they have set. Most of the time when you go through and work with it, you're not going to be working with absolute values. You're going to be in there dragging it, doing it visually. So with that, you can continue to follow along with this. We'll work off of the numbers that they have set just for the standards of consistency. So we come in here, we also then come in down and set our rotation. So we want to make it tilt to the right. So we're actually going to go ahead and rotate this. As you go through and look at the rotation, remember that we have rotation. Once we hit 360, it'll say 1x, and it'll continue down. That's how many times it'll rotate plus then the degrees. So what they went off of was 19 degrees. So you can see it's rotated here. So now we have it set on position, scale, and rotation. So we went through and adjusted all of them. So these are the values that were set for position, scale, and rotation. So at this time, check over your timeline, make sure that your parent links are there, so everything's parented properly. Make sure that you have the right position, the right scale, and the right rotation. That way when we go through here in a moment and we go ahead and start to create keyframes by turning on the stopwatches, everything's there. Make sure you're at zeros. Upper left should be all zeros. You should see the timeline playhead over to the right there. Because as soon as we start writing keyframes now, if you're in the middle of it or you're multiple frames off, it's going to not work out correctly. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to click and go ahead and activate the stopwatches for position, scale, and rotation properties, which creates an initial keyframe, which you can see there on the right side of the screen. So now we need to go in and start to work with the animation on this. Where do we want this to ultimately end at? So we're going to jump out to 14 seconds and 20 frames. So when we get out to this point, what we're going to do is we need to go through and adjust what we have for our balloon. Now there is one thing that I noticed on here. If you look at what we have for our composition, you're going to see here I have this set at 13 seconds because when we went through and we built our other composition, we didn't change the duration. So you'll see here duration. So at that, if we adjust that duration, you're going to see over here we have issues with where these are at. Now these are static things, so we should be able to extend all of them to match up with it. So on our different layers, I'm going to drag these out. Problem solving. Now on our canvas, remember the canvas is over here. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take my canvas layer. I'm going to delete it out of there. I'm going to bring it back in. And not. Try that one more time. There it goes. And that should be parented to balloon. I know what it's going to do right now. The canvas, of course, is not in the location and everything of our balloon because we had to go through and modify them. Come over here. see something. Okay. I'm gonna copy those, come back over to my balloon scene. We're gonna oops. Try this one more time. There we go. All right, now everything should be set on here, and we can come into our balloon scale rotation. Oh. SRP. There we go. Scale at 60. Position 844.5 and 2250.2. The rotation of 19 degrees. Now let's turn those all on. There we go. Everybody else get back to there? Or were you set at 20 seconds already? Yes? No? So sometimes things don't go exactly right, and you have to go in and problem solve to get back to where you need to be at. So now we have our balloon in the location that we wanted at, because had we gone to our 1420 mark before, we weren't going to have a balloon or a canvas or anything showing up, because at that point they were gone because they were ending at that 13-second mark. So we're going to go ahead and drag this up so that it moves to the upper right of the right corner. We're also going to take this and scale this down. So when we go through and start to look at it, position-wise, we can go ahead and we can grab a hold of this and we can move this up. So position-wise, let's go ahead and take this up to 2976.5. And negative 185.8. And then we're going to go ahead and adjust the scale to around 40%. They use 39.4. So those are the areas that we're going to move it up to. And we're going to change this to a negative 8.1 degrees. And if we look at that, it's going to place it up here off of this area. So now if we go through and we run it right now, what's going to happen with this is it moves through there. So you're going to see that it just barely hits the corner of what's there. So we're just going to scrub across and we can see that go and move. So what's going to happen with that is it's moving, but we want to adjust this so it actually comes up into the picture and then begins to sway. So let's go ahead and take this to the 3-second mark. And at this point, we can go ahead and we can drag this balloon. Because remember, once we're in a location, we have the stopwatches turned on. They're going to look at position, scale, and rotation. So anything that we do to this is going to get recorded with a new keyframe. So if I go ahead and grab a hold of this and I drag this straight up, bring it out here towards the center of this as well. So somewhere out around here, they're in the 950s and the low 400s. So we'll go ahead and we'll drag it out here. And then we can also deal with rotation as well. So let's go ahead and adjust what we have for our rotation value. So I'm going to come over into my timeline. You can just go over top of it. Remember, you can scrub it. You can do the same thing with your X and your Y values. If you hover over them, you can go ahead and scrub those. So go ahead and we can scrub a rotation. So somewhere around 11.5 degrees. That's a negative 11.5, I should say. 10.5, 11.5, something like that. Now what we're doing is going to make it sway as it's moving. We're going to jump forward then to around 616. Just moving up and out of what's there. We're going to go ahead and we're going to shift the direction of it. So let's take it out to, positive somewhere around 9-10 degrees. Essentially the wind's blowing it off of our page. So it's floating up, it's going to go across, so we're going to go ahead and adjust at this point in 616. We're going to position it over on the far side. So it's going to be over here somewhere around 530. So the X value somewhere right around 530. Our Y value, we're going to go ahead and bring this down to match up closer to what we had on our previous value. So we're in the low 400s. Maybe a slight movement up as it continues to come through there. Anytime, remember, we can go ahead and we can scrub and see what's going to happen with it. So we can see it comes up there, floats there, and then it's going to take off to go off of our screen. So let's jump a little bit back here after the mark. Let's go to the 720 mark. And let's go ahead and adjust our scale at this point. And this is where I had it at 40. So let's go ahead and just toggle it down to 40 so it's the same size as what it is at the end. And then they want us to go ahead and set a few different rotation values inside of here at different times, and also position changes as well. Remember, as we go through and set those, if we go in and we set any value change, it's going to change between each of the keyframes. So we can go ahead and decide rotation values first, and then go in and do position values, additional scale values if you want to. It doesn't matter the order because it's just going to go ahead and write that keyframe on there. So if we want to go ahead and look at it, I can zoom in here, and we can go ahead and start setting up what we have for the additional keyframes to give kind of a swirling motion to it. So let's go ahead and come in here. We're going to go to the 823 mark. So we'll just go ahead and key that in. We're going to come in here to our rotation. And let's set this to a negative 6.1. This is where it becomes data entry. Typically, you would just go in there, probably adjust those as you're looking at it visually, but to keep consistent, again, with what the book has on here, we're going to go ahead and jump in. Our other rotation then, we're going to go ahead and set this to 22.1. And then we'll go out to 1016. Whoops. 1016. And this will be a negative 18.3. So what's going to happen is you can get positive, negatives. The thing's going to be swaying because the wind's going to come in. It's going to blow this apart. 1124. We'll go to 11.9 degrees. Then lastly, 1419. Just before we get to the end of that, it's going to go ahead and go to a negative 8.1. So if you wanted to, you could zoom out and watch what's going to happen as it comes through there. So you can see it's going off. It's just going to shake as it goes off the page. Again, we can see this go through and begin to move. Now I want to go ahead and adjust some of our position keyframes. And this is where we didn't work, or at least I didn't work exactly with the numbers that they used. So we could see a little bit of a shift in what's going to happen with our positioning based upon using their absolute values that they have set. So we're going to go to the 904 mark. We're going to adjust the position here to 726.5 for the X and 356.2 for the Y. And then we'll go to the 1012 mark. At this point, we'll set the 1396.7 for the X and 537.1 for the Y. So then I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. And I'm going to take this back to the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick save. I also like to save before I do a spacebar preview just in case something goes wrong. And I'll hit the spacebar. It's going to play through. We see it come up there. It's floating. It's floating. And now a little thing. And now it's going to go over and off the page. So everybody's working right? You want to end up with a super exciting change? No? Okay. So now we have the basic path, and you can see as we go through and work with that it allows us to see the path. That's the motion path as it goes through here, and we can see it's going to slowly draw itself back. So this is where it's going through and working. You can adjust this at any time. You can adjust the curves on this. As we start to look at these points that are up here, if you click on any of the points, we're going to see these handles. So you can grab a hold of these handles. You can see here, if I go ahead and twist this around, what's going to happen to the path. So as we move that, it just allows us to fine tune what it is and how we want that path to go. We can grab a hold of any of these keyframe points. That's what these points are. The little boxes are indicating at a keyframe. That's the location of it. So feel free to adjust those. You'll see as you do that, notice that there's the anchor point that rides right along that. It's kind of like a rail for it. So feel free to move those around, adjust them any way that you want to, and then we can go ahead and save it. And like I said, you can go ahead, you can drag, and you'll see that it's going to follow that line. So that's our motion path. It's going to continue to ride it just like a train on the rails. Again, once you're happy, make sure you do go through and save that. Now we're going to add in some additional elements. So we know that we had the fire, and we know that we went through and we parented the arm. So we want to go ahead and begin to work to control that so it moves the arm, pulls on the igniter cord, and we're going to have the flame show up on that. So let's jump back to 308. At this point, we're going to go ahead and make sure that you're able to see everything on there. They list 100%. You might be able to get a little bit larger. Not quite. So we're just going to set it to 100%. We could also come in here and just simply say fit to bring us all the way up. So this allows us to see everything that's inside of our composition. So now we have this set. We want to go ahead and work with this. If you want to zoom in closer, you can, just to see the hand itself as it goes through to move. We're going to go ahead and select our forearm layer and also the upper arm layer. So I'm going to come over to what I had for my balloon. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, hit U. Remember the Uber key is going to go ahead and collapse those down. And I have my forearm and my upper arm that I want to go ahead and use. So I'm going to go ahead and select forearm, then hold down Shift or Command. Either one will work since we're only dealing with two different layers. And we're going to select those so we can go in and begin to move them. So with them both selected, we're going to hit R, which is just going to give us our rotation value that's there. And once we pull that up, we're going to go ahead and click on the stopwatch next to our rotation. Now you only have to click on one of them because we have both of them still currently selected. So once we go through and do that, we have both keyframes are now set for our rotation values as to where it's currently at. Remember, it's following the balloon. So as that balloon moved, that arm's already moved. Now we need to actually make an adjustment to this. So we have it set. Let's jump forward just 9 frames to 317. And at this point, we want the character to go ahead and just tug a little bit on that cord so that it actually turns on the igniter. So we're going to go ahead and click so we're deselecting so we don't have both layers currently selected. And let's go ahead and go to our forearm layer. And we want to go ahead and we want to adjust the movement on. So you can see as you go through and move this, it's going to swing it around. Now it looks like he's got a cane. He's trying to beat some little kid with it or something. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to adjust the value on the forearm layer and set that to a negative 35. Now as you do that, you're going to see that it looks like it's back behind him because we still haven't gone through to adjust the rotation of our upper arm yet, which we're going to put to 46. So at that point, you're going to see now it appears as though we have that rotation pulling down on the cord. So now that the cord's down, we need to go ahead and begin to work with the composition and move it over. So he's going to actually pull the cord multiple times. And then what's going to happen with it is we have to go through and start to work with the fire that's there and positioning the fire so that when it goes through and pulls it, that we actually have the flame with it. So as we go through and start to use it, you can see, if you go ahead and just scrub, you'll see arm's going to move here, pulls the cord down. So you can see how that animation goes through and works. Now what we need to do is we need to go forward to the 423 mark. He's going to pull on that, but we can't, he's not going to constantly keep it pulled. And we're going to go ahead and adjust then the rotation of our forearm layer, which is currently at negative 35. We're going to make it negative 32.8. So we've changed it on the forearm, and now we want to go ahead and we want to add a keyframe related to the upper arm. So what's going to happen with that, and we've worked a little bit with the keyframes, is we didn't change a value, so we want that value still sitting where it's at right now, which is at 46, but we want a keyframe for that. So over on the left-hand side, we have the keyframe, and we go and we can click on that. It's just going to add a keyframe based on the value that's currently there. So once we do that, we'll see that we now have a keyframe set for that location. Because we want it to stay there, but then we're going to go ahead and we're going to ultimately position the rotation or set these back to 0 because 0 is going to follow what's going on with the other pieces that it's parented to. So what we're going to do now is we need to jump forward just a little bit to 506. I tried to scrub. It didn't want to hold. So we're going to go back to 506. We're going to go ahead and set both of these back to 0, which is going to put them back to where they were originally at, related as to the other item. So we see that we have that there. So if I were to deselect, bring this back out so we can view it. If you go ahead and scrub, you'll now see that it's going to come up. We see him pull the igniter cord, it moves over, and then we go ahead and we release that back to where it belongs. So we want to go ahead and we're going to duplicate these keyframes because he's going to pull the cord 2 separate times. So to do that, let's go ahead and come down here to our rotation for the forearm. If you click on the word rotation, you should see that it goes out there and it selects all the keyframes. So all your keyframes are going to be highlighted in blue. If I hold down Command and click on the word rotation underneath of the upper arm, you're going to see that those keyframes are then copied as well, or selected as well. So now we're going to go ahead and take those and we're going to copy them. So I'm going to hit Command C, which copies the keyframes. Now, as we go through to start to work with it, it looks at those keyframes, the spacing between the keyframes. Wherever I move my playhead to, and then turn around and hit Command V to paste, it's going to paste the first keyframe in line with my playhead. So once I do that, see, don't want extra layers. Okay, so mine wasn't, it wants to copy the layers when I did them together. So I just went and did mine separately. So click on rotation, Command C, and then do the same thing for the other one. It should allow you to click on both of them. But instead, just do them both individually. So now it's gone, it's copied the keyframe. So if you go through and you play it out here again, you're going to see that he pulls down on it. And it's going to go through and release it back. So now we have that set to where he's pulling the cord 2 separate times. So at this point, we're going to come down here and I'm going to go ahead and select both of these and just go ahead and collapse down and hide all the properties that are there. And then I'm going to go ahead and save what's there. So at this point, the head and everything is staying put. We're going to go ahead and set it up, and we're going to rotate the head a little bit as we go through and start to deal with him igniting what's there. So let's go ahead and select our head layer. We're going to hit R for our rotation. And let's go ahead and jump back to that 308 mark. And we're going to click the stopwatch. So we're setting our initial keyframe based on the rotation of the head. And then we're going to move forward 9 frames. Let's go ahead and give ourselves a rotation of negative 10.3. So we're going to tilt his head back. So he pulls down the cord. He's going to look up. He wants to make sure he's got flame coming out. So we're going to head forward to 423. And then once again, we're just going to click the add or remove keyframe. It's going to set us a keyframe there. Then we're going to head forward to 506. At this point, we're going to go ahead and set that back to where it was, so his head's back down. So you should see that you have keyframes that are similar to what we already had with the other one. So with that set, we're going to go ahead, click on our rotation, hit Command C to copy those keyframes. Take us back out here to 710. And we'll go ahead and hit Command V, which is going to paste those keyframes back in. I'm going to save that. Then I'm just going to go ahead and hit my R to collapse down the rotation property for it. So now if you go through, you're going to see he brings the head back, and as he pulls, the head's going to look up a little bit as it goes through here and continues to move. Now let's go ahead and adjust the eyes a little bit so that there's just a subtle change when he goes through and moves his head. So let's go ahead and select our eyes, and we're going to go ahead and hit P, which is going to be our position property. The other ones we were dealing with rotations. This was going to deal with the positioning of it. If you needed to, you could always zoom in on the eyes so you can see exactly what's going to happen with them. Now we are zoomed in at 1600%, so when we start looking at it from a pixelation standpoint, yes, it's going to be a little bit of a shift to it. So let's go to the 308 mark. Again, these are back at the beginning of where that is, and then, of course, this all moves, so jump back over here to see the eyes. So inside of it, we're going to go ahead and click on our stopwatch. Again, initial keyframe 308, same spot we had the other stuff going on. And let's go ahead and make a subtle change. So it was at 62. We're going to go to 62.4. So you'll see that the blacks the eyes goes ahead and moves over. And we're going to go ahead and set the Y to 53. So you see the eyes move over and up. So just that subtle change with the eye, and I can see what I just did. I didn't jump over to 317. So if you set that at 308, make sure you jump to 317. And now let's make that adjustment on there. There we go. So we see what's there. We jump out to the next time, which is our 423 mark. Again, if you want to adjust it so you can see what's happening, we can bring that across here and see, making sure that we're moving it with the hand tool, not with the selection tool, otherwise things are going to get all out of place. So when we get back to this point at 423, we're going to go ahead and just create ourselves a keyframe here. So we're going to create that keyframe, and then we jump to that 506 mark. This is where we go through, go back, and we're going to set them back down to 62 and 55. So the eyes go back into that. And then once again, we're just going to click position, copy those out here to 710. We're going to go ahead and we're going to paste them. So now if we go ahead and take this, I'm going to set this to fit. If we have nothing selected, you should see as you go ahead and do that, the eyes are going to look up, all so subtly. Now we go through and we have him set to go in and move what's there. So I'm going to save this. So we have the video down here. Remember, this video is the one that goes through when he ultimately goes in and pulls on the cord. So what we need to do is we need to take this, we need to make sure that this comes over here, and this is going to start where we go through and we have the fire. So at 308, he pulls the cord. Well, we're not going to start our fire video up until 310. So we're going to bring this out here and we're going to go ahead and set that up. So we have our fire set here at that 310 mark. Now with that selected, I'm going to go ahead and I want to duplicate what's there. So I have this set starting at 310, and we're going to go ahead and choose edit. We're going to come down to duplicate. That's going to give us a second fire movie, and we need to go ahead and slide that out. So that's going to start out here 2 frames beyond. So 710 is where this is at. So at 712, we want our other fire to begin. So see, he pulls the cord, then he lets go of it, and the fire goes up. Once again, pulls the cord, we have the fire, lets go, it goes out. So I'm going to save that. So at this point, we go through and we see we have our balloon. If we go back to the home and we play it, you'll see we have our balloon. It's going to come up onto the screen. It's floating around, gives it a little bit of fire. Once again, hit fire another time, and then all of a sudden the balloon's going to go and fly off the edge of the screen. So what we want to have happen with this is we're going to go ahead and we're going to set this up. We're going to create a solid layer, and we're going to make it as though essentially we're going to have the wind come through there, and it's going to blow them off of the page. So I'm going to come over here on my eyes. Let's go ahead. I'm going to collapse down everything that is there. Now I want to go ahead and create myself a new composition. So I'm going to Command N to do so. And inside of here, we want to call this wind. Because like I said, we're going to create some wind coming across there. It's going to be the issue that we have with it. So we're going to come in here, we're going to make sure that we have our width. It's going to be 1920. Height should be 1080. We have here for our frame rate. Remember, we're working with 25 frames per second, so we want to go ahead and set that to 25. And then we want to make sure that our duration down here is set to 20. So when we go through and look at this, we have wind. Allows it 1920 by 1080. 20 seconds. Frame rate should be 25. We'll go ahead and we'll click on OK. So now we have this nice new canvas here. We want to go in and add ourselves, or we're going to create this to be some wind. So we want to go ahead and get used to creating new solids. So we can go ahead and right click and say new solid. Anytime we go through and we begin to create stuff, effects, things along those lines to get applied to a solid. So we're going to go ahead and choose solid. Inside of here, what is our solid going to be? We're going to call this wind. We come down here to our color. We're going to choose this as black. Say OK. And then there's this right here where it says make comp size. When you go ahead and click on that, it goes through and makes sure that the size of the solid is the entire size of the composition. So if we're going in and we're creating stuff and it's going to be applied across the board, then we're going to make that the comp size. And we'll go ahead and click on OK. So now what we have is we have this black solid that goes over top of everything that is here. So now we want to go ahead and we're going to apply effect into this. So we're going to go ahead and come over to our effects and presets on the right side of the screen. And we're going to come up here into our search. And what we're going to look for is we're going to look for fractal noise. So once you start typing, you'll see we have fractal noise down in our noise and grain area. I can see the edges of my solid are selected. There's the little handles for it. So if I double click on fractal noise, it's going to go ahead and apply that to my solid. So now my solid comes into here. If you look at this and see what it looks like, it reminds you of render clouds inside of Photoshop. Same concept. So we have in here, we have this effect set, and then over in our effects controls, we're going to see all of the settings related to the fractal noise. So we want to come in here and make some adjustments to it and watch what happens on your composition. So we come in here to fractal noise. These are all things that are available to us. You can feel free to click on some of them and see what starts to happen to them as you select them. So swirly, terrain, and ultimately we're going to come back and end on smeary for our type. We have then what type of noise is in there. We have block, linear, soft linear, and lastly spline. So what we're going to end up going to inside of here is we're going to take soft linear. When we come down to the contrast, you see as we take that up, there's more contrast. If we take it down, there'll be less contrast. If there's no contrast, then it's white. If we keep going, you're going to see eventually we can get this all the way up to be black. So when we come in here and set this, we're going to go ahead and set our contrast around 700, so a high amount of contrast. And then our brightness, we go through and adjust that to 59. It's going to push up what is actually white with it. So now we have this set to 759. And we're going to toggle open this transform property. So how are we transforming what's there? So right now this is what we're seeing out here. As we go through and we start to look at our scale, as we increase the scale, you're going to see it pushes up how large those fractal elements end up being. And we're going to push this up 800 is what they want us at. The other thing you can also do in here is we can click on any of the blue text, remember, and key in a value of 800. So what we have here is we have our wind coming up like this. Now inside of our settings, we have this offset turbulence. So let's go ahead and click on the stopwatch next to our offset turbulence. So this is all from the beginning. We're going to go out to this 2-second mark. And as we get to that 2-second mark, we're going to go ahead and change that offset value on the X. So right now it currently says 960. We're going to go ahead and we're going to take that and we're going to put it to 20,000. So it's going to go through and it's going to allow this to go in and move. So you can see here as we go through to work with it, what's happening with that. So that's moving across just for those 2 seconds. Once you get past 2, notice it doesn't move anymore because we don't have another keyframe. So it's staying on that value that we have at the 2-second mark. Let's go ahead and toggle up. So we're just going to hit the disclosure arrow instead of seeing all this stuff. Because what we're going to do is we're going to add another effect to this same layer. So we have our wind selected. And we're going to come back over into our effects and presets. And we're going to go ahead and in here we're going to search for a directional blur. So we're going to go ahead and stretch those out so it looks like wind. So I'm going to start typing in directional. And you'll see that comes up, blur and sharpen. There's our directional blur inside of here. So once again, I'm going to double click on that. It's then going to apply our blur. We can see up here inside of our effects controls what's happening with it. Right now, the blur's applied, but we haven't gone in and adjusted the blur at all. So we come in and we start to adjust what's happening with our direction and our blur length. We'll start to get some changes to what is here. So let's go ahead and adjust our angle here to 90 degrees. Let's go ahead and take our blur length and put that up to 236. So you can see what's happening with that. So those large numbers, if small numbers on there, then it's not going to show a whole lot. If you wanted to get this even higher, if we went to 500, you can start to see what's happening with those values. So a lot of times when you're working with the values, you're going to click on it. You're going to probably most likely scrub until you get that visual look that you are going for. So now we have this sense of motion that's being created inside of here. So let's jump back over to our balloon scene timeline. And what happens is we want to go ahead and we want to bring in our new composition that we have here that is called wind. So we're going to bring that in. We're going to go ahead and put the wind as the uppermost layer inside of here. So let's go ahead and drag this down and place it above that canvas layer. So now we see that is above there. Well, we don't want this wind to come in right away. So we're going to come over here to about the 8-second, 10-frame mark. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and set the endpoint for this. So you're going to see it there, and then all of a sudden, that's when the wind shows up. So all of a sudden, the tornado hits Kansas, and then he's about to not be in Kansas anymore. So we go ahead and we have that set. That's at the 8:10 mark, and we want to work with this in case, as we look at it right now, we don't want it to look like this. We're going to go in and we're going to deal with blending modes. And blending modes are something that we use all across the Creative Suite. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to the bottom of our timeline. Here's where it says toggle between switches and modes. So we're going to go ahead and toggle over into our modes. And once we're inside of here, we're going to make sure for our wind layer that we're going to go ahead and we're going to adjust this mode here from normal to screen. So what essentially happens with that is it ignores the black. So So all that we're going to see is going to be the white areas that will work with that. We're going to take our wind layer and we're going to go ahead and adjust the opacity. So we're going to go ahead and click on T. So we'll toggle out the opacity. And right here at the beginning, we're going to go ahead and toggle that on to set ourselves an initial keyframe. And then we're going to adjust what happens with this as we begin to go on. So we're going to go out here. We get the 820 mark. In this case, look at how much we are seeing of that. We're going to go ahead and adjust this opacity down, so to 35%. So it's going to move across there, but it's going to get lighter. We'll go out 2 more seconds to 1020. And we're going to go ahead and set the opacity to 0. So now it's blown through there. It's gone completely across. And if you want to see that effect, then we can go and let go, and you can see the clouds coming through there. And essentially that moving up and off of the page. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save that. And now we're going to go and we're going to animate some pre-composed layers, because remember we did have the canvas that was inside of there. So let's go ahead and go back to our canvas composition. And inside of here, we're going to go ahead and get this to the 910 mark, which is where the wind kind of has worked its way across. And we want to go ahead and make sure that we have all 4 layers selected. And let's go ahead and hit R so we see our rotation values come out here. And then we're going to hold down Shift and hit P so we can also see our position properties. So all layers are currently selected. So let's go ahead and let's set our position and our rotations. So we're going to click on the stopwatch next to each of them. So it's going to give us our initial keyframes. Then we're going to go through and start to animate these. Let's go up to the 924 mark. So all of our layers are still ultimately selected out here. We want to go ahead and adjust our rotation value. So we're going to take these to about 81 degrees. This is as they all kind of swing themselves around. So all of them are turned over, winds hit them, it's kind of blown them down, and then they're going to go and work their way off of it. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to deselect, so nothing's selected because we want to be able to go in and adjust the positions of each one. So you can adjust them however you want to. When they went through and worked with them, green went to 100. Red ended up at -74. What they're doing is they're crisscrossing what they are. 113 for blue, and green was, or yellow was -103. So these are the values that they went off of for rotations. Again, we're at the 924 mark. Then we're going to move forward just a little bit more to 1012. And what's going to happen with this is we're going to move all of these then off of the right of the page. So with that, you can grab a hold of them one by one, moving them off. So the yellow, and you can really take these anywhere you want to take them. So yellow is going like this, and grab blue, go like that. Green can come up here. And lastly, red, I'm going to drag something like that. So you can see down there then, based on positioning the keyframes as to where each one ends up being located at. So if you wanted to make sure it works, you can go ahead and drag back and see they come off, and then they all go flying off of the page. If you want to, you can make any adjustments necessary. If you wanted to change their paths so they become something else, you could do that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now I want to go and we're going to add an adjustment layer to these as well. So let's go ahead and we're going to click off away from everything in the timeline. And we want to come up here. We're going to do layer, new layer, adjustment layer. So layer, new, adjustment layer. You'll see it's going to go ahead and it's going to select everything at the very top of our stack. We're going to see an adjustment layer out there. So what happens with that is as we go through and begin to add stuff to it, it's going to apply it to everything below there. So that adjustment layer, the same way we work in other applications, it's going to apply those down there. So with this adjustment layer selected, we're going to go ahead and we want to add in an effect to this. So let's come over here to our effects and preset. I'm going to click the X to clear out what was there. And we want to go in and use wave warp. So once I type in wave, you're going to see here wave warp. So it's a distortion. So let's go ahead and double click on that. And what's going to happen is that's going to be applied then to everything here. So you'll see as it starts to move, if we break them up, you can see they're starting to get this wiggle to them. Right now, when we see the size of the waves, that's, for me at least, there's way too much wave going on in here. So let's come out here and make some adjustments to this. So at 912, so at 910 we hit, you'll see there's waves currently on there. So we want to go in and adjust this. So at 912, this is when they're just starting to come apart. We're going to go in and set up our effects. So we come up in here. There's our waved warp. We see wave height and wave width. Let's go ahead. We're going to drop our height right now down to 0. And we're going to go ahead and take our width over here to simply 1. So you can see what happens to that out here. So again, we don't have the heavy waves that we had when we first initially put them on there. But as we move over then, just 4 frames to 916, we want to go in and make them move a little bit. So at 912, we have our wave height and width set. So let's go ahead and set keyframes for both width and height. So height, width. So that way when we get to 916, we can start to make these have some motion to them. So we move over to there. We're going to go ahead then and adjust our height up to 90. We'll tab down to our width, and we're going to set our width value to 478. So now if we scrub through and we start to see what happens, you can see how they wiggle as though the wind is blowing them, and they're going to go ahead and continue then as they move off of the page. And we're doing this just via the adjustment layer. So instead of trying to apply an effect and everything to each layer individually, you can utilize your adjustment layers to apply it globally across the entire composition. Now as we go through and we start to work with it, we don't need the wave warp. So we don't need this adjustment layer on here until we actually go in and have them coming apart. So we're going to take this and we're going to move this to that 912 mark. And at the 912 mark, this is where we're going to go ahead and we're going to set that endpoint at 912 for this adjustment layer. So when we have this selected, we simply need to come in here and we're going to hold down Option and hit our left bracket or begin bracket. So you'll see it goes through and it trims all of that off prior to that area setting an endpoint at that 912 mark. So now if we come back in here, there's nothing here. It's not rendering anything there. We hit that. You can see them then get caught by the wind and get blown off to the right side of the page. So we have that now set in there. The last thing is that we have is, if you remember when we first brought in the sky, there were the clouds that were wrapped with those colors that came off of there. So what's going to end up happening with that is we're going to go ahead and animate the sky so that those come in and across what we have for our background. So let's jump back over to our balloon scene. So now, since we made adjustments to those, you can see that they're no longer on there because that wind came in and it blew the colors right off of this. So now that we have those set, let's go ahead and work to animate the sky that's behind here. So we're gonna go back to the home part, the very beginning, home zeros. And let's go ahead and let's animate what's there. So let's select that sky layer. So all the way at the bottom, sky.ai. We're gonna hit P for our position. And we want an initial keyframe here at the very beginning, because we're gonna animate this across what we have on here. So we're gonna jump out to the 16-second mark. And at this point, we're gonna go ahead and bring it down and to the left until the wrapped clouds are centered on it. So I can go ahead and bring this down, bring this across, until we have these centered, or what appears centered enough for you. They're at negative 236.4. Oops. And 566.7 if you want to do it exactly the way they have it set. So that brings it over here into this location. And then we want to go back now to that 8-second mark, because you're going to see we have them set right now just essentially as a linear transition, so it's going all the way across. We want to go ahead and get those off of the screen at this point. So we want them far off to the right. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a hold of them and move them off of here. Still got to go farther yet. Now, I didn't work on my colors, so your colors may look like they, well, how to flip up to that spot. But now I have that set. So now you may want to go in and work with the keyframes and go in and ease the keyframe. So what we can do with this is we can come over here at the very first keyframe, and we can go ahead and right click on that keyframe assistant. Ease out. Remember, we're talking about station, so it's easing out of a station into that transition as it goes in there and moves across there. We'll take this middle keyframe. We're going to right click on it, say keyframe assistant, easy ease, because it's in the middle of it, so it's going to ease in there and then pick up speed again coming out the other side. And then the last one that we're going to come down here on the far side, we're going to go ahead and take this and ease into the station as it goes into there. So you can go ahead, you can drag them back and forth to be able to see what exactly is happening with it. Once you're happy with that, we can go ahead and we can save that. I'm going to go ahead and take this back to home, and I'm going to put it to fit. I'm going to preview so far everything that I have on here. So that's what we have up to this point. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add ourselves an audio track behind it. Now, a lot of times when we go through and we start working with things and animations, the last thing we add is the audio. So at this point, we're happy with what we have inside of here. So let's go ahead and go back into our project panel. And let's go ahead and import. So I'm just going to double click on a blank area. We're going to have this soundtrack.wav file. So let's go ahead and select that. We're just going to say open. And we're going to drag our audio to the bottom of our order. Since audio tends to be, or you typically are going to place that at the very bottom part of the stack. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we're going to jump out here to this 18-second mark. We can preview the audio, but this is where we want to go ahead and we want to make sure that the music goes through and it changes as we get to this point. So let's go back to the beginning. We'll go ahead and play it and listen to the audio real quick first. So there we have our audio playing its way through. We're going to go ahead and we're going to come over here to the 18-second mark. At this point, we're going to hit N. That's just going to set our work area. So in this case, we're indicating that our work area is going from the very beginning 0 up to the 18-second mark. And then what we're going to end up doing with this is we want to trim this just to that 18-second mark, which is where these are ultimately in place. So when you go through and work with stuff, you may have compositions that are too long. They maybe go beyond what you actually need to get the animations to occur. So once we go through and set this, we can come up here to our composition now. And we can go ahead and we can choose this trim comp to work area. So when we do that, you'll notice it goes in there and gets rid of everything that's beyond that 18-second mark. So it allows us to trim down the composition just to that area. Now if we go over here to the 16-second mark, what we can do is we can also look at what's going on with our soundtrack. And what do we have for audio levels? We can go in and take that audio level then and drop that down. So what we have is we want this to fade out. We don't want it just to drop off. So when we come in here and look, we have our audio and our audio levels available to us. So since we go ahead and we toggle that down, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set ourselves a keyframe at 16 seconds. That's at its normal volume that we have there. And then we're going to jump up to the 18-second mark, which is our last frame that's there. And we're simply going to go ahead and drop this audio level down to -40, which is going to allow that just to fade out. So instead of it just playing, and then just audio just cutting off and everything cutting off, it's going to allow that to go and fade out. So if I go back just a little bit and play it. So what we have there is we have the clouds come on. Once they get into position, our music fades down and it ultimately goes through and stops. So I'm going to go ahead and save that one more time. So now we go through and we start to work with it. Think about ways that you can use the different tools. Audio coming in, like I said, audio typically is the last thing that you're going to add and get used to placing that audio. I shouldn't say necessarily the last. When we go and we start to add it, especially from a multimedia setup, usually if we have sound effects and things like that, we're bringing those in, and those are going to be some of your last things that you work with. Once you're done, like I said, go ahead and close everything back up on there, and you can feel free to preview it once again. You can take this in and export out or render out the balloon scene to see your final video compilation.